Welcome to this episode of the Essential Church Podcast, an ongoing conversation about some of the most important issues facing the local church today. I'm your host, Andrew Arndt, and today I want to take you to a conversation that we had recently. It was actually, I was out of town, so it was Dr. Glenn Packiam and pastors Holly Packiam and Sarah Jackson, both of whom serve with the downtown congregation. And Glenn teed up a conversation with them on emotionally healthy discipleship. We've talked some about the emotionally healthy curriculum in the past. This time we sit down to talk about the emotionally healthy discipleship curriculum, how to integrate it into the church, what it does, what it's for, and how it helps us bring together not only spiritual disciplines, but also our own emotional health. It was a great conversation. Those of you church leaders that are looking to raise the level of discipleship and spiritual formation in your churches will be very interested in this conversation. So without further commentary from me, here's to the interview.
Well, we're here today to talk about the emotionally healthy discipleship courses, and those courses are made up of two sections: emotionally healthy spirituality, emotionally healthy relationships. And before we get into it, I just want to kind of zoom out a little bit and give people a picture of how these courses sort of fit. At New Life, every pastor is always thinking about discipleship. How do we do discipleship? And I don't think any of us would say, you program it and programming it is the answer. At the same time, you have to have a little bit of a plan. And I'm reminded of the metaphor of the subway map or the underground map in London. You know, if you've ever been to London and you've seen the subway map, it looks super clear and organized. There's these straight lines and you're like, oh man, it's amazing. But when you overlay it with the actual city map of London, the stops are nowhere near where you think they are. So if you took like an underground map and you tried to say, oh, I'll just walk from this stop to the next, it might actually be like significantly longer. It might be more windy. It doesn't actually correspond. But they simplify the map because it's just easier to put that, on the walls. And in many ways, what we're trying to do with discipleship is we know that it's messy. We know that it's up and down, back and forth. It doesn't go in straight lines. But churches want to chart a little bit of a course because it helps people say, oh, maybe this is a pathway. I've got small groups, I've got mentors, I've got friends, and I've got some of these courses. So I'm joined today by Pastor Sarah Jackson, Pastor Holly Packiam. I am married to Holly. And
Disclosure.
Full disclosure. And we're here to talk about these courses because both of you have been leading these courses at New Life Downtown, New Life North. And I just want to, let's help people understand a little bit. So what is this and who's it for?
I do think it's interesting, Glenn, when you talk about how you want some sort of a pathway, because it's interesting because on one hand, we don't want people to tell us necessarily how to do discipleship. Yeah. There's something in us that says, don't act like you know what you're doing and have it all together. Right. But then when the rubber meets the road, a critique of certain discipleship methods is, well, you've given me ideas, but I don't know how to do that, how to be practical. So what I love about the EH discipleship material is that you've got sort of the 50,000 foot view, but then you also have really practical skills for how someone personally embraces the lifelong journey of spiritual formation, of discipleship.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I think that's really unique about the program, so we have the EH Discipleship, as Sarah said, kind of as the umbrella. Then we have emotionally healthy spirituality and emotionally healthy relationships. And I think how it's different maybe than a tradition, how we might typically in churches think of discipleship is that, we kind of think of this pathway as like, I become a Christian, I get involved in church, I attend a small group, someone helps me learn how to pray and, do those kinds of practices. But oftentimes that's really disconnected from our emotional journey. Yeah. I think for me, it was that way growing up. I sort of learned those things and that's wonderful. But I think when I started learning more about emotional health, that was, this course helped me to bring those two pieces together.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I remember when we first started doing these courses, we were all like, well, we're going to do the spirituality course, but the relationships course, it's probably intuitive, right? I mean, we all get along. This is fine. And then once we dove into the material, we realized, oh, these are really interconnected. Yes, it's about loving God and receiving the love of God, but it's also about how do I practically love people well and receive love well, which is something that I think isn't necessarily something we've talked about very well in
Right.
the church.
Right.
Absolutely, and we sort of just say kind of generic things sometimes. Well, be kind to one another, love
Right.
one another. But on that emotionally healthy relationships course in particular, there's like these sentence stems. Can I check an assumption with you, or hey, I'm puzzled by, and people might say, oh, that's kind of corny or whatever. But the truth is, these are meant to be like training wheels, right? I mean, it gets people going. Okay, so let's give people some details about this. There are each 8-week courses, and they were developed by Pete Scazzero in Queens, in New York City. New Life Fellowship, no connection with us other than friendship. But there's some myths sometimes with this, like, oh, this is a course. I mean, here we are with 2 pastors who happen to be women, and so the myth kind of maybe is reinforced that, oh, this is like for women only. How would you address that myth?
Well, I think it can really be for anyone. And I think
it's
another
meant to
myth
be.
might be that some people might think, especially with the emotional part of the title, that maybe it's a counseling group, or maybe it's for someone who's only walked through trauma.
That's another one of the myths.
Things like that. And I would just say it's for anyone coming in wherever your walk is with the Lord. I just finished up an emotionally healthy spirituality course yesterday, and there were, someone who'd just gotten out of prison, someone who'd suffered, 30 years of abuse, but then, there's someone else who's like, I never really knew what it was like to actually really have a relationship with the Lord. Like I read my Bible and prayed for 30 years, and I didn't know that I could be with Jesus and sense his presence and sense his leading. And so I would say it's for anyone.
Yeah. I absolutely come across people all the time. Every single time we run the course, someone's like, well, this is probably more for sensing people, right? Not intuitive. No, it is for anyone who wants to deepen their relationship with God. You could be a new believer. You could be someone who has been faithful with the Lord for decades. We never reach some epitome in our relationship with God that, all right, nailed it, done.
Right.
I just
Right.
scoot from here to my death into eternity.
Yeah.
There is always a place with God where something is healed, something is uncovered. And so again, while it might be that you needed language for something in your relationship or your experience of God, or maybe in particular seasons, you need a practical skill. How do I lean into faith when I feel stuck?
Right.
How do I love someone well when I don't like them or enjoy them? And how does that apply to how God relates with me? So this is not a counseling session by any means, but it will require the challenge of digging into our inner world, which is something
Yes.
that typically, especially in evangelicalism, we give a lot more attention to the outer world than to our inner world.
Yes.
That's so good. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a moment of personal vulnerability, whatever you're comfortable with here. But how have the courses impacted you yourself? And both of you have hinted at some of that a little bit,
I think kind of going back to what I was saying a little bit ago, I think I had those spiritual practices in some form throughout my life, becoming a Christian as a child, and sort of started to learn how to do those things. But it was later in my life, in my 20s, and I went through a counseling program, and really that was what provoked a lot of this journey of becoming aware of my emotions. I think I was a stuffer. I wanted to bury things, shove things under the rug, walk away. I didn't really want to or know how to. I didn't have any language, any skills as to how to process that. And so I think bringing these two things together has been amazing to realize God created us as emotional beings. And he, all through scripture, we can see where he has emotion. He's angry or he's sad and so I think it's an invitation for us to step into that. And I felt that invitation, I think, in going through it. And I've gone through it many times now, and I can honestly, truly say it never gets old. I don't think there's any other book besides the Bible that I've read that I keep reading over and over.
Same.
And like The Onion, you keep peeling it back. Every
and like
time.
an onion makes you cry.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
right. No, I
Stinks
will.
sometimes.
Exactly. I will feel like, okay, the Lord revealed something new to me. So teaching it, it's not like, or facilitating it, I try to make sure everyone knows I'm not here because I have all my practices perfectly in order and I do all of this right and I'm completely self-aware and, I'm learning and growing with them, and the Lord just continues to reveal new things.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful. I mean, we could be here all day. I'm sure both of us talking about what has happened. I would say for me, it's really helped me see Jesus in a different way. I think I downgraded his humanity a little bit, and I think in fully realizing a little more about how there's no value judgment on emotions. They're just a part of being fully human. And he accepted that, and he took that on in his incarnation, has started to make me take my emotions more seriously and realize that the awareness of what I am experiencing inside of me is part of discerning God's work in my life. And really fully, and even sometimes painfully, but sometimes joyfully accepting and appreciating that has even changed the way that I understand the love of God and where he is moving in my life, the way he's affecting other people. It's also made me more patient with the journeys of other believers, which I guess I really needed, sadly. I think it's made me more honest.
Yeah.
You know, I've been through the course maybe 6 or 7 times. The spirituality one more, the relationships one maybe 3 or 4. You guys, I think it's over a dozen times, I'm sure. But I think for me, one of the things is, you know, early on, Pete talks about how we can use God to run from God. And people in ministry, you know, you guys listening to this, pastors, church leaders, we're out front. So like you said, Sarah, the public life, the outward life it's more dominant, and our own inward life kind of gets ignored. And then secondly, just that idea of I've got spiritual language for everything, and it's this is a spiritual attack, or this is and not to say things can be both.
Right.
There can be a spiritual component to it, and there can be an emotional unhealth where you're like, man, I got to address that, you know. So going back to move forward, and then he talks about this idea of exploring your past, which I didn't really want to do. You know, I mean,
past is in the past. Let it go.
I'm a new creation, and he talks about that. You know, but they have this saying in their church. Jesus is in your heart, but Grandpa's in your bones. Like you have these scripts that you kind of pick up. And just recognizing, what are the narratives? What are the scripts that even as a leader, why do I react to these situations? Or why do I overfunction in these situations? When I feel like the staff is in crisis, why am I like, I've got to hold everybody together, or I got to make sure that everybody all thinks the same? Could it be that some of those things come from your family of origin and stuff? So just making us integrate our whole selves is really, to me, it's a way of laying our whole selves before the Lord and saying, Lord, work with not just who I am in this moment, but work with all of me. So I love that.
And I think that a refusal to pay attention to that, a refusal to ask God to show us things from both what we've experienced in the past, our present day situation, and even to pay attention to our hopes and dreams for the future, is to miss out on an opportunity to be blown away by the work of God in our lives. If we aren't willing to do the work, then we won't get the reward and benefit of gratitude just rising up in us. I can't believe what you've done in my life and how faithful you've been to me.
I think one of the things that we hear about in evangelicalism is like, I'm a new creation. And Pete talks about that in the book. Like he's telling his wife, Geri, Geri, I'm a new creation. Like, I'm great. Like, I always make the best decisions. He's like, no, I'm married to you. I know that's not quite true. So we are, but so it's like, yes, but not everything is done in us yet, right? Until eternity. And so there's this processing and this continuing to take a step forward with the Lord and say, Lord, I give you permission to continue to work in my life.
Good. For a moment, I thought you were going to tell a story from Mark. We didn't take that.
I'm reading Philip Yancey's memoir right now. Yes, and it's heartbreaking. It is a work of staggering genius, but it is heartbreaking to see what we're living out. Some of the bricks that were laid in the foundation of the Western evangelical church, so many decades before us, right? And the things that were not just acceptable, but promoted as far as just divorcing oneself from paying attention to the feelings of others, or putting, again, like I said before, putting more attention on what am I showing, what am I producing, right? Am I saying all the right things when I'm in a with my congregation? Am I even are my facial expressions, the appropriate and acceptable ones? And then behind the scenes at home, Philip's talking about his experience and going, even as a kid, I knew this doesn't make sense.
Something's
Why is
wrong.
my parent acting this way with these people and another way with me? And yet that is the invitation to all of us, is my inner world congruent with my outer world? And we can't do it on our own.
The prayer of the psalmist, give me an undivided heart.
Yep.
I mean, that's the idea. The idea there in Hebrew is just a heart that's united, like the unified. So we've made church leaders squirm a bit because we know we are actually the ones who need this work, and maybe because we have such an emphasis on the outward life. Let's take a step back. Let's pause off of that. How about our people? How have you seen this impact the church? Yeah, Sarah, you've been leading these groups at New Life Downtown. Holly, you just came off a group, a lot of women at New Life North. What are some of the, and you told some of the stories, but just, big picture and individual, what's the impact of it?
I heard a report from a man who I highly respect in his 60s. He wrote an email after the courses saying, I've been following God for a long time. And I know this, I respect him and his relationship with God. And he said, but when we talked about, one of the sessions is called Journey Through the Wall. We talk about what, when you feel stuck in your relationship with God, is that a legitimate thing? Is that a faith issue? What's going on? He said, I had experienced these things in my life before, but I didn't have language for it. And so I didn't know, A, what to call it, B, is this good? Is it bad? Is it okay? Am I not? And he said, I could look back on my life and see, that was actually a love work of God in my life. And I kind of thought hoped so at the time, but I didn't have the language that this course gave me to really own that and appreciate it. So I think it's giving people language.
That's really good. That's really true. Yeah.
I think a story that I hear in different ways over and over is one where people share that I was taught growing up in Christian faith that I wasn't supposed to have emotions, or I wasn't supposed to, this was going to take me down a wrong path to, if I ever, said I'm angry, or a lot in many homes I think people say I wasn't allowed to feel sad, or I needed to go deal with that with myself, or I wasn't allowed to be angry. And so just especially those harder emotions, many people growing up in Christian homes weren't allowed to experience that, or maybe experienced it privately but weren't allowed to share that openly. And so I think I see this thread in so many stories of God knows anyway, but God wants me to come to him and to come to others and say, this is how I'm feeling. And I think the invitation there is, how is God, what is he saying to us through that he's speaking to us maybe through that joy or through that grief, or, how is he coming to meet us in that?
That's so good. When I was doing some of my work on my doctoral stuff on worship and what people are experiencing, I had to interact with some research on what emotions are. And one of the basic sort of insights from psychology is that emotions are a mode of perception. They're a way of seeing the world. So when you experience, this is sort of one-on-one stuff, but when you experience the emotion of anger, first of all, emotions they're pre-reflective. So they just arise. You don't tell yourself, be angry. It's precognitive, the pre-reflective. It just shows up. But when you feel anger, what you're doing, it's because you have perceived an obstacle to a goal that you've had, for example. When you experience fear, it's because you've perceived a threat. When you experience sadness, it's because you're perceiving a loss. And so in many ways, what we're trying to do with spiritual formation, again, love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, all of ourselves, our whole selves. What we're trying to do is not to give our emotions sort of canonical authority, not to treat them like they have some sort of, authority in our lives, but to use them as modes of connecting with God and connecting with each other. So like you said, okay, I'm experiencing anger, and then, this guy's saying it's giving me language. So we say, what am I mad about? Lord, I'm angry that this is obstructing what I thought was my plan for my life. But when you pray that, that's what the psalmists are doing. And then in praying that, God might say, well, what if I have a different plan for your life? And you're like, doggone it, that's not what I want. So it's not about, naming my emotions and then God just validates my emotions and that's the end. God might say, Thank you for that honesty. Now let me reframe your perspective.
Yeah, I've heard them called signposts.
Yeah.
And as soon as we see, if we use our emotions properly as a signpost, they can cause us to pause and turn to God.
Yeah.
God, how are you coming to me in this? What do you want me to see that I'm not seeing? Is there something that I'm controlling or grasping and you want me to release it or surrender it to you? If we don't pay attention to those signposts, we hit brick walls. We get lost. And then we're like, why am I so lost? Why don't I know where I'm going? Why am I not turning to God on a regular basis? Because I'm not paying attention to the road signs.
That's really great. Really great. Okay, as we wrap up here, Sarah, I know you serve as a coach for the ministry here that Pete and Geri run. And if you're talking to pastors and saying this is what it would take to run the course at your church, or even to beta test it, what would you say to someone who's intrigued and wants to test this out?
Yeah, I would say go to the website. There are different emotionally healthy discipleship.org. Emotionallyhealthydiscipleship.org. And at the site, you can be directed to, are you just wanting to pursue some things for yourself? Do you have a team of people who you know are already excited about this? Or are you actually wanting to run these as a course? And I know a lot of churches think of this as, it's a small group curriculum. It's not actually. And you can do it that way, but it will not be used for what it's meant to be used for, which is a culture-changing curriculum that is meant to be slowly and methodically offered over the course of many years to change language, to change ways of interacting with people. But the website will be a great help to you. There is a financial investment in it, and I know that's been something that churches have often said, what gives? Why am I paying, $30 to $50 for a packet of books? But here's the thing, it's not a one and done thing. And so, how much would you pay for a college course, right? You do it once, you're done, you burn your tests.
Tried to block those
and
memories
okay, I'm
out.
sorry. But then this is, I have these books I've had for 4 years, and I continually go back to them. So whatever I paid 4 years ago has more than been worth it, because it's the kind of book, like you said, why do I keep returning to this book? Usually I don't do that. I read a book and I'm like, okay, I'm done. But yeah.
Right. And I think it's pretty laid out for you. So sometimes people might wonder, can I do this? Am I equipped to do this? There is training for it that you can go through. There's a workbook that is very laid out, really, even really minute by minute, if you want to do it in that detailed of a way. And so I think if you're wondering, if I could lead this, or if someone at my church could lead this, I think they really provide everything that you need to do it. And you can, equip others, like Sarah said, other leaders. We have usually we do it with table leaders. So table leaders are sitting with other participants and asking the questions. But what my feedback is, thank you for just bringing something so organized and detailed. And because it's laid out that way, we feel equipped even as a table leader to do this well.
And if you want to do it, give yourself 3 months to go through the material yourself, to order the materials,
let's talk about the materials. There's a book, there's a workbook, there's a devotional, and there's a DVD or a video link.
Right.
DVDs.
And so each of the courses has their own set of books. You don't share books for the two courses. So, but give yourself some time, because I talk with so many pastors who are like, we're excited about this, and we're going to launch this in September, and it is August 29th, and can you fast track those books here? And I'm always like, train wreck. You're going to hate this, because you're going to feel so rushed. And the point of this is to slow down. So give yourself 3 months.
We don't want this to be, it is sort of like an infomercial for the course, but we were not paid to say any of these things. But I do think when we've looked around at different materials, it pulls together some ancient spiritual practices, and it integrates some wisdom from the world of counseling and psychology, and it sets it with a biblical frame. There's a Bible study that happens every week in the lesson, so that we're trying to, again, the goal is an integrated spirituality between emotions and our minds and the Bible and our relationships and all of that. So in one sense, it is such a wonderful introduction because of the way it synthesizes from these other sources. But the goal is to help our people in discipleship in a way that is intentional, in a way that is holistic, and in a way that helps them take the journey for themselves to maturity in Christ.